Chad, we are back. Week 3 of the NFL season is here. Been an interesting first couple weeks, but as the data flows in, we know more and more about these teams. A lot of upsets have happened, especially last week. I think I saw all the top 6 or 7 biggest favorites all did not cover. So, we'll see what happens in week 3, but we're starting off Broncos heading into Tampa. Tampa with a huge win last week, outright over Detroit. I had them +7 on our video last week. What do you think here against the Broncos?
That was a great pick last week, Jake. That was one of those I told you it was kind of right on the number for me, and I stayed away. I wish I'd kind of followed you there because Baker looked great again. He had all of his weapons working. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Bucky Irving. They all looked great. Looks like Rashad White is a little bit banged up, but luckily they've got Bucky Irving there to run the ball, catch passes, and the biggest thing that stood out to me is again, Baker looks like he's having a lot of fun. And he's having a lot of fun in this Liam Cohen offense. So they seem to be a really good match. And I just can't see the Broncos scoring points. You look at the first couple weeks, Bo Nix really hasn't been able to get anything going. He's got 0 passing touchdowns. He's got 4 interceptions and just 384 yards in the air. Well, I think Bo Nix is eventually going to be a good quarterback. He just kind of looks like he's blinded under these NFL lights. So it's been kind of surprising to me. I was kind of hoping that Javonte Williams would get going this year. He's a full year off of his ACL tear. Preseason, he looked great. The Broncos looked like they could be a competitor this year, but they just haven't showed me anything. Meanwhile, the Bucs have really showed out, like you mentioned. They went to Ford Field and they beat Detroit outright. They forced 2 huge timely interceptions, and ended up winning that game outright. So this week, I like to see the Bucs at home winning by at least a touchdown.
Yeah, as I mentioned in last week's video, I was very impressed with the Tampa Bay offense in week 1, and they went out and did the exact same thing against Detroit. But as you said, their defense really, really stepped up, holding the Lions to only 16 points. This is one of the best offenses in the NFL, including having a great rushing attack. And they really held him intact, especially David Montgomery. Gibbs had a couple decent looks, but they're able to hold Montgomery in check. And I think when you're able to do that, you are in for a lot of success against the Lions. I like Tampa Bay here as well. I think Baker is playing awesome so far to start this year. They have a ton of weapons. And even with a guy like Pat Surtain, who might be able to take away Mike Evans, I think Tampa is just too deep across. And as you said, Bo Nix has been struggling to start the year, to say the least.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Chargers headed to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh -1.5. I would say they've probably been the most surprising team this season. They had the quarterback controversy with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Wilson gets hurt, but Fields has played very, very well so far in his first 2 games. Right? I'm a Bears fan. I would love to see Justin have a lot of success. I'm rooting for him. And I think the Steelers are using him a lot more effectively than the Bears did. Right? The Bears really didn't want to run him all that much. And obviously Justin Fields is a stud runner. So you combine the success that Fields has brought to this offense with the great defense that Pittsburgh has. I like him here at home. The Chargers have been decent at running the ball. A Jim Harbaugh offense, we expect him to have a strong run game. Joe Alt has been a top 5 lineman already in the NFL, and he's only a rookie. So, Pittsburgh's good defense. I think we're going to see a great battle between TJ Watt and Joe Alt. Should be fun to watch there. But with the lack of offensive weapons the Chargers have, if they are getting stifled in the run game, I don't see them being able to put up a ton of points here. I think the under could be a play here, but I'm also riding with Pittsburgh -1.5.
Well, Jake, I think this is the first strong fade that I'm going to have on one of your picks this year. I have strong feelings about the Chargers. The first 2 weeks, like you said, their run games looked great. Rookie Joe Alt has been outstanding. Last week he served up Myles Garrett his lowest graded game in his 11 seasons. And let's not forget, Myles Garrett was the Defensive Player of the Year last year. So between Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, I think that these guys have allowed Justin Herbert to suddenly have an offensive line. And Justin Herbert has one of the best arms in the NFL. He hasn't been able to showcase that because his offensive line has just been so trash. But when you stack that up with his ability to have some time to throw, and like you mentioned, Harbaugh's rushing offense, I just like this team this year. And then on top of that, you've got Khalil Mack, who's healthy. You got Joey Bosa, who's healthy. I don't think he's played an entire season in his entire career so far. So they looked good last week. They've beaten every team. They've covered the spread in both weeks. Now, that's not to take anything away from the Steelers. You know, Mike Tomlin is an excellent coach. He has how many years in a row of winning seasons. And yes, Justin Fields is finally kind of getting to showcase the talent that he had at Ohio State. You know, he looked good throwing the ball. He looked like he had better passing presence in the pocket. He looks like he's more comfortable here. And it's a tough one, but I still don't see the Steelers really being able to get that run game going, which is what they're going to have in order to score points. You know, Najee Harris just kind of looks slow. You know, they do have Jaylen Warren, who's kind of showed out. He's actually my favorite back in that backfield. But between the defense and Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack on the front, and between Justin Herbert getting time to throw the ball with this offensive line, who's, like I said, been outstanding, I like the Chargers to win outright, even in at the Steelers.
Well, we'll be going against each other there. And if you want to take either of our action on this game or any other, head to brothrow.com/YouTube to sign up now to get all your bets in for NFL, college football, MLB, and more. Chad, let's move on to the next game on the docket. The Houston Texans, fresh off a Sunday night victory against my Bears, now headed to another NFC opponent, the Minnesota Vikings, who have probably been the most surprising team with Sam Darnold. At least the most individual player that's the biggest surprising is Darnold's massive success. What do you see here as a home dog for the Vikings, as they've been a little bit injured?
Yeah, so you nailed it. The injuries is kind of what's kind of swayed me here. I have numbers that I run, really simple numbers actually, but this is one of the games that stood out to me. The Vikings are home dogs, which I think is really going to highlight a lot of people to this game and say, hey, the Vikings have looked good. And I don't think that they should be dogs at home. So I think the exact opposite. Justin Jefferson's questionable. Jordan Addison's questionable. Sam Darnold, while he has looked pretty good, he's just not going to have that, Pro Bowl talent potentially in the game anyway. So that's going to be something I'm going to watch. But if those two guys can't go, I'm definitely on the Texans at 2.5. The Texans, meanwhile, have had so many offensive weapons for C.J. Stroud, to throw the ball with. Offensive Rookie of the Year last year, and he's continued that pace this year. Really high, like we've mentioned before on the Texans this year, they've got Nico Collins, who's one of the biggest, baddest receivers in the NFL. They've got veteran Stephon Diggs, who they struggled to get the ball to last week, but he had 2 touchdowns in week 1. Tank Dell, he's going to get going eventually, and Dalton Schultz, who's also an outstanding tight end. So between all of those weapons, I just think there's going to be too many points that they're going to put up on the board. And, we said the 49ers are above and beyond all other teams, and then they just shocked us all last week. I mean, that was my survivor pick in every survivor league I had. I couldn't imagine them losing to the Vikings. But that was kind of, I think, their lull game this year. They've given up their lull game. It was at the Vikings, and now we're moving on, and I just think the Texans are going to be too much for the Vikings to handle.
Normally coming off of a giant win against the 49ers, I would tend to agree with you that it may be a little bit of a come down week, a letdown spot for Minnesota. But as you said, we thought the Niners were by far the best team in the NFL. I still kind of believe that. So the fact that Minnesota was able to go out and get the job done, even with all the injuries, remember, and that last drive where they needed a comeback, they needed that last touchdown, Sam Darnold was able to get it done with none of those weapons on the field. So being a home dog and now having preparation for the game with some of these other guys who, yes, obviously they're not as good as Jefferson or Addison, but they're getting now the first team reps. They should be more ready to go. I like how this Minnesota team looks. I think Darnold has been awesome. And getting points at home, I'm kind of tempted to take him. I don't know. Tough spot here.
Mm-hmm.
But where Sam Darnold giveth his former team probably wishing they have him back, the Carolina Panthers making big waves this week, benching their starting quarterback and number 1 overall draft pick, Bryce Young. Massive story. I mean, a new head coach. So, obviously anytime a new head coach comes in with no ties to the former guy, he's going to have him on a much tighter leash. And Bryce Young has been horrible, just horrible so far in the NFL. I agree with a lot of the points out there that he was never set up to win. He was put in a position to fail. The team around him sucks. I agree with all that, but still he hasn't really made any standout plays, any big time plays that say, oh, this guy has it in the tank. He's small, he's short, whatever. I think that Andy Dalton is a very serviceable NFL quarterback. I mean, yeah, he's bounced around the league a little bit, but he knows how to run an offense. He knows how to make plays. He knows how to take the ball and not put it in danger. And now that he has a huge opportunity to prove himself and try to get a job in the rest of the league, I think he's going to make the most of it. Carolina has not been as bad as people want to give them credit for. I believe they have one of the best offensive lines in the league, at least in terms of time to throw for Bryce Young. He just wasn't doing anything with that time to throw. Their receivers aren't great. Their skill positions aren't great, but going against a team led by Gardner Minshew and you're getting 5.5 points, I think the team is actually pretty motivated and rallying behind Andy Dalton. So I'm going to take the Panthers and the points here. It may be a gross pick, but I think that Dalton is going to provide a lot of momentum and juice to this Panther squad.
You said it. It's gross. It's one of those hold your nose and take the points, even though it's at the Raiders, but the Red Rocket's back, man. I mean, I've got a special place in my heart for Andy Dalton. He was with the Cowboys for a little bit. He was drafted the Bengals.
Bears too.
The Bears. There you go. I mean, he's, like you said, bounced around, and he may have found a home here with the Panthers because, like you said, Bryce Young, what a fall from grace. I mean, number one, their number one pick, traded everything they have to go get him, and it just hasn't worked out for whatever reason. He's outstanding in Alabama. I don't know what the deal is, but the point is, Andy's now in, and he's going to throw the ball. So when I look at the Raiders, they got a win against the Ravens last week, which again was another huge upset. I mean, congrats to Vegas last week. My God, they just raked. But we said that the Ravens might have a down year this year, and it's obvious that that's the case. They lost 3 offensive line starters. And we mentioned that was part of the reason that Lamar Jackson was able to go and have an MVP type season. And that's been a huge deal. And I think that's going to continue to be the trend. But I just can't get behind the Raiders just yet. I mean, you give the Raiders credit, but not that much credit. Brock Bowers has looked incredible. I mean, he's clearly the future of the tight end position, and he's landed with the Raiders. Gardner Minshew's been good, but it's Gardner Minshew. I just can't get behind the Raiders just yet. And I like the sentiment here. Everyone thinks the Panthers really stink, but they really, if you watch the tape, they just really haven't been that bad. They just haven't been able to get anything going. So for as bad as the Panthers have been, even with Bryce Young, this just feels like too many points. So I'm leaning Panthers. I don't know if I'm going to put my money on the line, but I'll probably lean with you here.
Well, moving on to Monday night action. There's actually 2 Monday night games this week. In the early slot, we got the Jags headed to Buffalo. Bills are -5 here. What are you seeing for the early Monday night slate?
I like the Jags. I think it's 5.5 points is kind of an odd line. I think at this point, the Jags are 0-2, and the Bills are 2-0. But the Jags have played a really stout defense with the Browns, and they played Miami when Miami had it going, when Tua was healthy. But I kind of have a hot take, and that hot take is that Trevor Lawrence is better than Tua. God bless Tua. I hope he's okay, but I also hope he doesn't play another down in the NFL just for his personal health. But that aside, if Trevor Lawrence had Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, I think he would be crushing it as well. So when you look at the weapons that the Jags have in their rookie wide receiver, Brian Thomas, through 2 weeks, he's number 1 in route win rate at 92.9%. That's outstanding from a rookie, especially a guy who comes in 6'4", 4.3 speed with 17 touchdowns at LSU last year. I think this is their weapon of the future, and it's only a matter of time before they really get him going. And I think this is the week that happens. When you look at the Bills' defense, they're missing some key players. They're missing both of their inside linebackers. Terrell Bernard is questionable. Matt Milano's out for the season, and I just think there's going to be a lot of holes in this offense that are ripe for being exploited. The Bills are 2-0, like I mentioned. They played the Cardinals and they played Miami, but they're just beat up on defense. So the 5.5 line stuck out to me. And when I looked at the history of last year, and I look at the Jags, the weather's supposed to be better this week. Last week they kind of took the ball out of Trevor's hands with the rain, and with the Browns, opposing defense that just kind of just held them. I think that this is a good spot for taking the Dogs in Buffalo.
Yeah, I agree with you on this one. I mean, the Bills have obviously looked really good so far to start the season. Both games, they've scored over 30 points. And, we talked about in the preseason that, at least me personally, I was expecting them to take a little bit of a step back with the loss of their receivers. And so far, it's been mostly in the run game, right? James Cook has been awesome to start the year. He's been a top fantasy running back. He's averaging, 5 yards a carry. And I just think that Jacksonville, now that it's like, okay, we've seen what Buffalo wants to do now with their new offense, they have enough tape out there that's like, okay, if we're going to lock down the run and force these receivers to beat us, then so be it. But I think that we're going to finally start seeing teams start to challenge the Bills by putting extra guys in the box. And I think that Jacksonville will have a really, really solid defensive game plan. It's certainly not give up 30 points here. I mean, the over-under here is 45.5. So if the Bills aren't scoring 30, we'll see. I like getting the points here with Jacksonville. Finally, moving on to our last game of the day that we're talking about for the video. Green Bay heading to the Titans, a massive, massive Malik Willis revenge game. He played pretty well last week for the Packers, right? You know, I think everybody saw that he was going to come in and they instantly faded the Packers, but the Packers ended up beating the Colts outright. A lot of surprise there. But I just don't think that the Titans are going to be as surprised by that this week. I think they obviously know what Malik Willis can bring to the table, given that a lot of these guys were teammates with him. He was playing as the backup. So they got a lot of the ones on defense, even had a lot of practice time against Malik Willis. You know, we know that Matt LaFleur loves to call a heavy run scheme, a heavy run package. He's from that Shanahan school of offense, you know, zone blocking, use the run to set up the play action. And Josh Jacobs has been great so far to start the season. I was very high on him this year. For fantasy, for gambling so far, that has paid off. But the Titans have one of, if not the best defensive lines in all of football. So I think that the Packers are going to have a very tough time running the ball here. And if you're going to put the ball in Malik Willis's hand to win the game, then I'll take the Titans -3. I know Will Levis isn't that good, but the Titans have one of the best defenses in the entire league, and I will stick with them in this game at home.
Yeah, Malik Willis, he's got an extra week to prepare, but you know he only threw for 122 yards last week. He did have a touchdown, but like you mentioned, the run game was outstanding against the Colts. But I think 261 yards on the ground. But I think that's more just of an indictment of the Colts defense, who's going to probably be one of the worst defenses. At least that's what they've shown us so far.
I mean, Joe Mixon had like 150 yards rushing against them too, so I think that's definitely the case.
Yeah, absolutely. So. I'm not going to put too much stock again in Green Bay's ability to run the ball, especially like you mentioned against this Titans defensive line, their defensive front, and just like one of the games we talked about previously with the Bills, I think they're going to catch on. They're going to stack the box a little bit, and they're going to force Malik Willis to throw the ball. So if I'm going to bet against Malik Willis or I'm going to bet against Will Levis, I guess I'll take Will Levis. It hasn't looked that great because he's kind of gotten into his own, gotten in his own way. But, this Green Bay team is just not the same without Jordan Davis, obviously. Jordan Davis was one of my picks for MVP futures. He's out, and they're just going to struggle, I think, like you said, against this front. And it almost feels like the time that they start getting these veterans like DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard, Tyjae Spears. I think they're going to have a better go this week, and I definitely like this pick.
Well, that is going to do it for us for this week of NFL picks on the Bro Show on the BroThrow YouTube channel. Reminder, if you do want to bet on any of the picks we talked about in this video or any other game in any other sport, go to brothrow.com/YouTube now to sign up today. Chad, is there anything else you want to talk about before we sign off for this one?
Good luck. Sweep your slate.
Absolutely. We will catch you guys in the next one. Have a great week 3. Peace.